Hi everybody, this is Scott Dudley from SaaS Startup Stories, and today my special guest is Aman Agarwal, who's based in Estonia, and he's the founder
Thank
of
you for having me.
Sanpram Transnational, which is a global educational company helping business leaders thrive in a tech-driven future. Welcome to the show, Aman. Are you ready to rock and roll?
Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, absolutely.
You're welcome. All right, so let's begin by starting with your background and what got you interested in SaaS in the first place.
Sure. So I have a background in engineering. Before this, I was helping build self-driving trucks in Silicon Valley as a systems engineer. And before that, I was actually a sales executive at a software education company. Um, and so I've been working on and off in SaaS for a while.
Yep.
And that's how and my interest in SaaS was like back when I graduated from college. I realized that software companies, this was back in 2014, 2015.
Okay.
I realized that software companies were growing and becoming legit huge corporations
Mm.
at a much faster rate than traditional companies that you could work for, right? So the ability to scale the company and to scale your income as a salesperson or whatever you do at a SaaS company is just much higher than in other kinds of businesses, right? Just by the nature of the business.
Yeah.
And so that got me interested. It was a purely greedy financial decision back then, just by looking at how the business works and the business model for SaaS, and so that got me interested. But I think it's also very interesting because you can, scaling goes both ways. You can build a small sustainable business that makes, let's say, a few $100,000 a year. You manage it for like 3-4 hours a week and have a pretty sustainable income, just a good lifestyle. Or you can have 200 employees that sell $1,000 product per person per seat, that's growing to 100-200 million a year, and that's a different lifestyle. And it's the same industry. You're just selling software that other business people can use. And so the variety that you can have, and the kind of problems you can solve, it's there's not a lack of creativity in this space as well.
Yeah, fair enough. Makes sense. I mean, a lot of those reasons that you just mentioned, they're the same reasons that I'm interested in SaaS as well. So that's quite interesting. We've got something in common. Yeah. All right. So you were a B2B sales executive for two tech startups, both worth over $1 billion. So tell us a little bit about that and how that eventually led to Sanpram.
Yeah, so the first company was Udacity. The other one I'm not going to mention because I'm still under a contract after I left them.
Okay.
Um, so yeah, it was fun. I think the first one was online education, and there it was more about helping corporations upskill their employees. Um, and I actually that's what started me on the path to becoming a self-driving cars engineer, because I was selling a program to these these auto companies, selling them like, hey, if you take this program, you can help upskill your best engineers to become self-driving car engineers. It's the future, it's going to be exciting and whatnot. And while selling that product, I kind of sold myself the product, and I was like, this becoming a self-driving car engineer is much more exciting than selling online programs and selling software, at least at the time being. And AI and stuff was just taking over so quickly back then. I decided to quit that sales job and become an engineer again. And that's how it brought me eventually to Silicon Valley, where I worked on self-driving trucks. That was that was a weird, strange experience. Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right, so let's go into a bit more detail about Sanpram Transnational and what you teach in your course.
Sure. So we teach the world's first training program on advanced technical fluency for business executives and entrepreneurs. And what that means is when I was working in Silicon Valley, I noticed that there's a huge communication gap between techies and non-technical people, right? You talk to, for example, salespeople or finance people, and they think that the engineers are stupid. And of course, if you talk to the engineers, they think the other side is stupid. In general, that's
Yeah.
just a general thing.
Yes.
And I found that pretty interesting because I come from both worlds, so I'm like
Okay.
neither.
Yeah.
And I realized that the reason why that gap is not getting bridged, quickly enough,
Yeah.
is that a lot of people see the path to bridge that gap to learn to code, right? The non-technical people think that they have to learn to code and become a pseudo engineer
Yeah.
to be able to empathize with engineers and have the same conversation, and that is totally not true,
Okay.
right? And so you have 1.5 million like coding boot camps and coding programming classes on the internet. If you want to learn to code, there's plenty of options for you.
Yes.
But that is for people who want to change careers and actually become technical, become practicing engineers, learn skills. It's a long journey of like 2.5 years
Yeah.
of dedicated practice before you can actually be skilled enough to make high level technical decisions, if that's your path, right? um, However, if you're an executive, right, a business executive who doesn't want to learn to code, doesn't want to become an engineer, they chose a profession and they want to stay in that profession,
Yeah.
they just want to be able to talk to engineers, then the way that you need to go is like, and the analogy I use is like being a homeowner, right? If you're building a new house for yourself and you hire an architect and a contractor to build it, you want to be able to have, even as a non-technical person who's never built a house before and has no training in architecture or construction, you can tell the architect like, hey, I have 5 family members or whatever, I want this many bathrooms, I want an island kitchen, I want bedrooms like this, and these are my preferences and whatnot. I understand that I don't need to import marble from Italy. I understand how a house is built. It's different from building a sand castle on the beach. um, you can have fluency in that regard where you can make sense to the architect and understand, just know enough to understand when the architect tells you that, hey, something is going to be expensive and something's not going to be possible. You can't go to the conversation saying like, hey, I want a place to sleep, I want a place to poop, and I want a water park in my backyard, whatever, right? So technical fluency is again the same thing. You want to be able to make decisions at a high level relating to technology. You want to be able to guide the experts, tell them what you expect. You want to be able to understand when they tell you like, hey, this is practical and this is not. And that does not require you to become an engineer, become the expert yourself, right? It just needs that enough knowledge to communicate. And that's what
Yeah.
I teach in my course. I take out 90% of the stuff that you learn in engineering school,
Yeah.
that is geared towards becoming practicing engineers. And I take that knowledge and wrap it or package it in a way that it helps you make decisions about technology
Yeah. I understand.
and learn and understand what people are saying.
Yeah. It's actually an interesting analogy because I'm just about to start building a house myself. I mean, obviously, I'm not physically doing it, but yeah, we've got a building company that's building the house for us, and they're starting in 2 weeks. So I can sort of relate to what you're saying. Yeah.
So just to stay on that for a second,
Yeah.
how have the conversations been? Because I do assume you don't have a construction background.
Oh, not at all. No, I've got no idea. Yeah.
Yep.
So, yeah, I mean, I've just been basically letting them sort of point me in the right direction. And yeah, like you said, I give them the basic idea of what I want done, and then they do all of the technical work. So that's pretty much what you're saying. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly. So would students learn any code in your classes or zero code?
Well, they would understand what code is and
Right.
different kinds of code, what a programming framework is, for example, what a tech stack is. So they
Yeah.
understand the why and the how, right? They just don't. Sorry, they understand the why and the what,
Yeah.
right? But they don't understand the how of how to code.
Yeah, I see.
right?
Okay.
And the reason is because you want to be able to have empathy. So they understand what version control is, for example. They understand what automated testing is. They understand every aspect. Like when engineers talk amongst each other, in a meeting, they can participate in that meeting and understand what the engineers are saying. This can go to the computer and help the engineer fix something.
Yeah, I see. Okay, makes sense. All right, so to build on that, for non-technical people, what else would you recommend to thrive in an AI and tech-driven landscape? Have you got any other tips for non-technical people?
Yeah, I think the big one, except for building technical fluency again, and this is where technical confidence and technical fluency go hand in hand. The first thing is that you need to give yourself more credit, because I think a lot of non-technical people feel that, oh, they have nothing to contribute to engineering discussions, and that couldn't be far further from the truth. The technical strategy always stems from it's always derived from the business strategy that you have, right?
Yeah.
If you're building a streaming company, for example, you have a reason for why you're going into the streaming business, and therefore you derive the technical requirements of building a streaming system. For example, if you're Netflix or Hulu or Disney Plus, whatever,
Yeah.
right? If you're building a SaaS company, you need to, you understand what business you're trying to get into, what your customers want, and after that you decide, okay, this is what we need to build. And then the next step is, what technologies do we choose to build that thing, right? But 98% of your success is dependent on the business decisions you're making first, and not on how good your engineering skills are, right? Unless you're
Yeah.
going into the semiconductor manufacturing business or something where the technology is the business, that's a different discussion. But in general, for the audience of this podcast,
Yeah.
so the first thing is, give yourselves more credit, be more willing to participate, and be willing to put your foot down and say, like, hey, to the engineers, like, hey, this is what the big picture is of why you're building this in the first place. And this is what guides your decisions. Your decisions don't guide the overall business strategy to a large extent.
Yeah, I see. Okay. All right. So what advice would you have for listeners to learn to speak intelligently with engineers so they can manage with confidence and empathy? You've already touched on this a little bit, but is there any more tips that you could sort of add to that a little bit?
Sure. So I have one tip for when people are in a difficult conversation with engineers, where you can't get on the same page. And the tip is called forced empathy. And it's kind of similar to what I described before, but it basically means you have to step up and be the first person to be willing to explain to the engineer with empathy that, hey, this is the big picture of what we're trying to achieve, right? This is the business plan. These are the deliverables that we need for the business to survive. And now let's work as partners. So you teach me what is possible and what's not, and why, and explain to me, right? And this is the mutual enemy that we have. We're not in a confrontational stance against each other.
Yeah.
We're confronting this problem that we have, and now you're helping me, and I want to help you get to this goal, right? So you have to take the position of leadership and show the goal, show the vision. And if the engineer doesn't agree with that vision or the goal, then you have a different problem. You don't have a technical communication problem. You have a management problem in general. Like, people in your company or whatever are not on the same page about what they need to achieve in the first place.
Yeah.
And so having this conversation gets you to the truth of the matter when you're having a difficult conversation. And the other one is, when you're hiring your technical team the first time, right? If you're a non-technical person and you're surrounding yourself with your first few engineers, it's a pretty delicate balance where, I would like to take the example of one of my friend, James. He had a tech company and he had a technical co-founder who led a team of engineers, and my friend was the non-technical business guy who was from a finance background. And he said that at times he didn't even feel like he deserved to tell his technical co-founder anything, because he felt like he just didn't know enough, and he was kind of like not in his place to give any feedback to his technical people. And so it makes you, he felt technically handicapped by just not being able to say like, hey, okay, it took you 3 weeks to do this. Could it have been done in 1 week? You can't have those conversations. You can't even manage technical people if you have zero technical confidence in yourself. And so the way to combat that is that the first people you hire to be the technical experts need to have the heart of a teacher. And the heart of a teacher means they have the patience and the willingness and the ability to teach you the stuff about the stuff they do with empathy, and they understand that you don't know what they know, and they want to make you better at making decisions and grow with them, right?
Yeah.
And if you don't have that, if you don't have a co-founder who's willing to teach you what they do, then the gap is just going to keep widening, because he's going to go off and do his own thing, or she, um, and they're going to be like, okay, yeah, I understand more about the business than my non-technical co-founder, so I'm the real CEO of the company or whatever, and I'm the one who's making all the decisions because I'm just the engineer. I'm the tech talent here.
So what if, for example, if a company was split in half, where one half was marketing, the other half was engineering, and the engineering is only people that are technical, and then the marketing side is completely separate with the marketers? Mm-hmm. That sort of combination, to me, sounds like it would work pretty well. What would you say to that?
Well, it is the de facto standard of having two different departments. You have a marketing team and you have a engineering team.
Yeah.
The problem with that is that there's really there's always small clashes. Even the biggest tech companies that you could think of, like Airbnb, I have friends in all these big tech companies from Silicon Valley, and they tell me how frustrating it is on a daily basis to communicate with the other side. And people don't realize that just because they have accepted the reality of how it is so far, and it is just a fact of your life that engineers and the marketing people have different vocabulary, and engineers won't understand, for example, what a CPM is or a CPI is. These are advertising terms, and marketing people won't realize okay, what do you mean by back end and front end? Why can't I use this application offline? Why do I need an internet connection for this application to work? You have a lot of these teething problems, and the problem gets more serious when you're an executive, right? You have 100 examples of companies that were really the incumbents that got disrupted by a new technology because they didn't even notice the technology coming up and how it would affect their business, right? And the reason why Netflix, for example, they started by having a DVD mailing service.
Yeah.
And then they moved into a DVD mailing plus a small streaming business. And now they're a streaming company first and foremost, right?
Yeah.
That is, you can only make, and Blockbuster, on the other hand, you have all these, big companies that had DVD rental stores all over the world. And they went bankrupt because nothing was stopping them from building a streaming company at the same time, right?
True.
It's only that ability to make technical decisions at the executive level where the difference in communication can have magnified impacts. As a small marketing associate in your company, maybe that doesn't bother your job as much as when it bubbles up, which is why my company as well, we focus on executives in the first place, to make sure that more companies can stay resilient in times of turbulent change.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, I see what you're saying. All right, so without naming anybody in particular, are you able to provide an example of someone that's thrived from your teaching and what they ended up achieving?
Yeah, it was kind of it was kind of funny. So this guy was I'm calling him a guy. The student was a gold mining executive from South Africa. Okay, he was managing gold mining projects in Saudi Arabia. So he's a pretty wealthy, successful guy in his by default.
Yeah.
And he wanted to go into tech because he realized that if you can automate a lot of the stuff in the gold mining industry with technology there, that would be pretty basic for anybody from Silicon Valley or from a software background, because they're like primitive. They've been doing the same thing since the 70s and the 60s, right? Not much,
Yep.
like they still use paper for most of their things. And he
Okay.
said that if you could use technology to transform that business, you could have 30% higher margins.
Okay.
And that is for a gold mining company. That is for a very traditional business where after a span of like hundreds of years, they've probably driven the margins already as high as they can.
Yeah.
They've driven the cost down as much as they can, using their traditional technology and operational efficiencies. And he believes that he saw, when he saw the possibilities of, what you can do with software with very little investment, is that you can save 30% in a very traditional industry. It's gonna drastically transform the entire industry in the first place. If one company has, suddenly 30% higher margin, it's almost like a Ponzi scheme. Like, whoa, are you doing the right thing? You have
Yeah.
these high margins. Um, and so he actually, the funny thing is, he actually learned so much in the first module that he took a break and he hasn't come back for the second module yet.
Oh, okay.
Which is where we go deeper into the software and the tech stack.
Nice.
So
Excellent.
uh, yeah.
Cool. All right. So from your experience, what are the biggest challenges that SaaS startups have when they first get started?
Well, with any business, I think whether you're a SaaS startup or whatever, you need to know you're building the right thing, that you have a market. It's a marketing problem. The first thing you need is figure out where your money is going to come from.
Yeah.
Where your first 10 customers going to come from. You need to figure out the process of, okay, if I push this much effort into these channels, then I get this much money in return and this many customers, and these are my goals, right? Figuring out that equation is the first part of building a business. Because if you don't know where your next 10 customers or next 5 customers are going to come from, then you don't really have a business. You're relying on luck, right?
Yeah.
You don't
True.
understand how your industry works yet. And
Yeah.
you can't have that from the first day. For me, like, for example, I'm still figuring it out for my business, right? And it's the same for, I think, the SaaS companies, especially because they can get started so quickly by just coding away on their laptops for a few weeks, and they have a product that they can sell. So figuring out that that ratio of this much effort, these 5, 15, whatever channels, and this much revenue in return. Yeah, that's, I think, the biggest challenge.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. All right. So what are your favorite online tools and platforms that you use to run your own business?
Well, I like to be pretty low on technology. Given the nature of my business, it's just I use some online tools for teaching. So I use Google Classroom, for example, to deliver the
Okay.
course to
Yeah.
students. It's very adaptable. It's very flexible. I can personalize the experience for every student, so it works really well.
Yep.
I use your regular, video conferencing tools, and I use an email, calendar suite. So that's pretty much the whole, like how the whole software tool looks like. And over time, as I figure out more and more, I might need to, I'm going to automate and delegate more things.
Yeah. I see.
So that's where the tools will really come. But when you're in a place where you have that equation down, like, okay, these are my marketing channels, this is the
Yeah.
effort I'm going to put in, and this is what's going to happen after that, then you have a chance to delegate a lot of things and automate, you can put fuel on the fire, basically. And
Yeah.
that's when software tools really make sense.
Yeah. Okay. So what are you curious about or researching right now regarding SaaS in the future?
I think so. Coming from an AI background and autonomous robots, I think there's a lot of hidden potential in using AI to automate more things across
Yep.
all industries, AI and software in general. And the more I talk to now that I'm out of the Silicon Valley bubble, and I talk to people who have traditional businesses and work in traditional industries, I see how little of an impact software has had so far,
Yep.
even though it's huge compared to what it could have over the next 10, 20, 30 years.
Yeah.
right? There's a lot more possibility for digital transformation and using software and making software for very niche tasks that you wouldn't imagine have a huge market, but it does have a big market. It's just that people are slow adapters. So that's what I'm interested about. I think AI is definitely coming. Not so much in the next 5 years, I would say, but definitely in the next 10 years. It's going to be very widespread.
There's going to be a lot of people out of jobs because of it, but that's just part of evolution, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, they believe that after the Industrial Revolution, there would be no more craftsmen ever. You know, that nobody would ever have to machine things by hand because we would have machines building everything for us. And that is partly true. Like you build better and better machines over time. But I feel like given the world we are in today, you can be micro famous and still have a sustainable livelihood. You can have a really, you can have like, let's say 2,000 small individual people who buy your products, and they could be spread out all over the world.
Yeah.
And these 2,000 people care about one particular problem that none of the big companies and none of the AI companies are solving. And you can build a sustainable business by solving that problem. You can, and so I think the trend is moving towards niche businesses, solving niche problems through niche software.
Yeah.
And you would find companies building, let's say, like stuff like recruiting software that is specialized for actuarial companies, stuff like that. It's like really obscure stuff, like people who have obscure factories making obscure products. I think that's the same trend we're going to see in software.
Okay, fascinating. All right, so just to wrap up, where can people go to find out more about Sanpram Transnational?
Sure, thank you. They can go to sanpram.com, the website, and there would be a self-technical assessment for free, which can tell you how technically fluent you are, and what the gaps in your knowledge are. And that should be up, I hopefully by the time this episode comes out. So that would be a good exercise for the listeners, hopefully.
Perfect. All right, excellent. Thanks very much for being on the show, Aman. It was great to have you on. And yeah, thanks for your time.
Thank you, Scott.
Okay, bye.